Hello and welcome to episode 6. I am one of your co-hosts, Amanda Knox.
And I'm Carter Brown.
And we are so excited to get back to it. We apologize for skipping a week, but sometimes our health does come first, and that has been the priority. I want to start off and say a couple things. Like always, thank you so much for sticking it out with us. We have heard so much amazing feedback and a lot of people rewatching episodes and just already the transition and life change that this has had on people. And we've been 5 episodes in. So just wait till you see where we're about to pivot, what we're about to get into, and the paradigm shift we're actually going to create for you, because what's to come will continue to get even bigger and even better. And some good news to start our day is that we finally got back into our Instagram that we have been locked out of for weeks. What a nightmare. We actually gave up on it for a minute. We were like, you know what? It's clearly a sign. It's fine. We don't need it. I mean, at the end of the day, this a labor of love, a passion. It is a hobby, and we do this for free. We do this as a way to give back because genuinely this is what our heart and soul has desired to do. And I am forever grateful that I found my dear friend Carter Brown to do this with. There is not another human being in this world that I could fathom doing something like this with. And every time we talk together and every time we get together and are around each other, it's just constantly affirmed. So shout out to our souls for understanding this journey, because I'm so grateful to be doing it with you. But something that Carter and I really want to get into, we were like, we want to make sure that people aren't getting this twisted, that we aren't here to be some self-help podcast, which is just not what we're here to do. We are literally here to help you expose the architecture of illusion and guide you back to the origin of your own mind, right? So this is an identity deconstruction as spiritual liberation, not self-help to you becoming a better version of a lie that was created by society for you. And that's something really, really, really important to us, because we know that there are a lot of self-help podcasts out there, and, they're amazing and they're great. And there are books and there are speakers and there are so many ways to get self-help. We need to go deeper, because just becoming a slightly better version of a programmed version of yourself is only going to get you so far, right? All right, listen, what if your entire personality, and I know, don't get triggered when I say this, but what if your entire personality and everything you do and who you think you are is just a defense mechanism built for survival in a system and created by a system that was created to disconnect you from your soul? Okay, so I want to reiterate, we're not here to change your mind. We're here to reclaim it and help you shift your reality while doing so. Now, with that, I know you're probably like, wait, what? That seems... Okay. It's not left field when you understand it, right? But I want you to really sit and think about all the things that have happened. We've talked about generational trauma and all these things. Let's sit and really think about the hundreds of years, the decades of societal brainwashing that have been created to make us think, feel, and act like we do today. Right? Like in comparison to just hundreds of years ago. Think about thousands of years ago. Think about tens of thousands of years ago. We are now in a state where humanity is massively ego-driven, and it has skewed the nature of things. And, we've forgotten the purpose. And I think the entire reason our society was created, the system, is so that we wouldn't know what we are starting to know. And there's a reason for that. It's all by design. You've got to look around and look at things, and you're starting to see it clicking for a lot of people now. Like, okay, they're getting it. They're understanding. They're understanding that we're not just here to work 5 days a week to live for 2. We're not just here to conform to a system of enslavement and debt, because what is the purpose of that? And I made a reel on this morning because I just harp on the fact that you have a 1 in 400 trillionth chance of being born, and you think struggling is the point of existence? And here's what's crazy is between 0 to 7 years old, you are in the theta brain state, which is a natural hypnotic state where your subconscious programs are installed without filters, right? That's where it, and we're going to get harsh for a second, but that's where if you are telling your children under the age of 7 that, you've got to work really hard to be good at stuff, or they're whiny or they're bad or they're great and they're beautiful and they're loving. Like, this forms the subconscious belief system, and it starts between 0 to 7. We're receptive. We're like Play-Doh that can be molded. And, you know, something really powerful for me is that your subconscious mind is actually processing 40 million bits of info per second, while your conscious mind, only 40. 40, not 40 million, 40, which is insane. You know, saying that, you realize that most of your choices are just loops on replay, which is crazy. Like, your conditioning, it all stems from that generational conditioning, the conditioning we've been fed. So it's removing that narrative. And what's crazy is I realized I love ancient history. Like, I love like actual ancient history, not the stuff that they tell us as history.
Stuff they purposefully don't teach us.
Literally, like, when you look at like ancient traditions from Kemet to Sumner to Vedic, you know, things like that, it's understood that I need to back up. Because something really important is that a lot of people are like, well, why do we have to live this way? You know, I made a point to talk about that they have created a society that has enslaved us and brainwashed us to believe that the life we're living is normal. We're supposed to do it this way. We're supposed to go to school for 12 to 20 years and to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and to work 5 days a week to live for 2. That is what society has created for us. And here's the thing, it's created us to be in a system, because if we understood the true nature of reality, there would be no system, right? So when you look at ancient history, you know, it was very much understood that the soul chooses to incarnate into form, which I know some people are gonna be like, this is woo-woo, bear with me, okay? That the soul chooses to incarnate into form, entering a matrix of density where forgetting is part of the divine plan or design. Whatever. Forgetting is not a mistake. It is the beginning of initiation, the sacred veil that would one day be pierced by remembrance. So the purpose, what is the purpose? You're probably like, I don't understand. The purpose is finding the path back to self. That is the point of everything, right? But something changed. Empires were created. Where did they come from? They came from ego. Everything stems from ego. So when you look at the rise in empires, organized religion, you know, empires and religion gained power. They seized sacred texts and understandings and created a system that helped people forget and then rewrote history and the meaning of existence instead of guiding us back to remembering. They've embedded us with doctrines and essentially encoded us with a really deep amnesia, binding people into shame, separation, and obedience with a myth of sin replacing the map of initiation. And for me, I've realized that, you know, what was once sacred forgetting has become weaponized amnesia, which is a tool that severs us from our own divinity and only serves who? Does it serve you? It doesn't serve you. And when you realize, and I want to say that again, I want to repeat that again. When you realize that society and what they created is weaponized amnesia, that's what it is. And it's such a profound thing.
Part of the process is the amnesia. So in my cohort that I'm doing right now, I actually talked about this and I called it the divine amnesia. Like, we are all meant to have this forgetting and remembering, but it's been weaponized against us to further us from reaching the remembering.
Yeah. Which, I mean, when you look at things, it makes sense that would be a point. A lot of people are like, well, existence doesn't make sense, or what's the purpose, or blah, 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 blah. But when you really realize, when you strip away the onions of the brainwashing, the onion layers of the brainwashing, I love to use onions as an analogy. I don't know why.
They're so good, though.
They're so good. And they actually have health benefits. by the way. Don't know if you're on that side of TikTok yet, but the raw onions. Okay. ADHD.
I love raw onions.
No, but really it's like stripping away the onions. I cannot reiterate it enough. When you understand these things, not just like base level understanding, when you understand these things to your core, it changes the way you think, you live, and you coexist with everything around you. And it creates peace. It removes division. It removes ego. It makes you realize that those lessons and triggers are mirrors of lessons that you were sent here to learn, to understand, to embody the remembering. Because once you start to remember and you wake up to that remembering, it changes everything. There's no way to even go back from that. And, it's such a profound place to be, but it's also a hard place to be this day and age when society has been so incredibly conditioned for so long. And I feel like there's got to be a reason a lot of us are starting to come to these realizations and understanding. There has to be.
There's too many of us.
Right?
Yeah.
There's way too many of us.
That we're all separately coming to the same conclusions. Not like, we all took the same course somewhere, read the same book. Like, no, we weren't seeking this. It just fell into our lap.
I mean, you sought it through relentless prayer of asking, what was that prayer again? I feel like you have to say it again. It's just so powerful.
Just for 5 years, I just kept on asking God, like, where else have I been deceived? Where else have I been believing a lie? And where do I need clarity on? And like, this is where it led me. Literally God gave me these answers. And I'll get into more of that later about like leaning upon him and having that guidance upon him. But I wanted to talk more about like the beliefs that we all have about ourselves that society puts on us. Like, what beliefs have you believed about yourself, not because you came to the conclusions about yourself, but because someone else labeled you that. Like for you, you talked about how growing up you were told that you were just too much, and you believed that for a very long time until you realized, no, I'm just enough. And so for me, I grew up for the first 2 decades of my life. Well, up until 4th grade, I did not know the concept of being smart or stupid. I didn't understand that. But in 4th grade, there was like this very defining factor that happened in my learning journey. And my teachers in 4th grade went on strike. And they're like, y'all don't want to learn? We're not going to teach you. So I went into 5th grade at a private school, new school, not knowing multiplication, division, how to read an analog clock. Like, I was very behind, and I transferred to a private preparatory school. And that was when I first realized that I was behind, or I wasn't at the same level as everyone else. And I didn't realize that it was because I wasn't taught what they were taught. So I just kept on not getting good grades. And that label put on myself that I was stupid and that I was incapable. And so I started to believe that about myself. And I believed that all the way up until I got to college. And I mean, I was like a C student when I graduated high school. Like, seriously, nothing interested me. Like, I hated it. And that was because I was believing I wasn't good at it. So that's where there was no passion towards learning, because why would I want to do something that I didn't think I was good at? And so there was that disconnect. But then I went to college. I removed myself from a situation where I was not thriving. I hated high school. I hated middle school. It was not an enjoyable time for me. And so no wonder that I was able to remove myself from what was not serving me in an environment where I didn't feel safe to a new environment where I am thriving. I can find all the friends that I want to. I can make a new name for myself. And I went into classes and I started getting like A's. And I was like, who dat? 'Cause that ain't me. I never got A's growing up. Like, this is wild. So I started to believe myself that I was actually smart. But let me tell you also this. I went into college thinking the most that I can offer the world is to be a kindergarten teacher. That's the most I thought that I was capable of and doing in this world, was that not 1st grade, not 2nd grade, not 5th grade, kindergarten. I believe that's all I could do. And so that's what I went into school to do, was early childhood education, because I thought that was all my brain could handle.
You know what's crazy is that is literally the epitome of a fractal of a global shift. One where you must earn your worth rather than you're realizing it. That is that precog part of our subconscious brain based off of all those things. I mean, it's just so crazy to watch it all kind of tie itself together.
For sure, for sure. But then it gets even more crazy the more that I leaned into accepting who I always knew I could be, that I'm not stupid, that I am smart, that I am capable, I can have passions and learn and become knowledgeable and speak about something like I know it like the back of my hand. And so thankfully, weirdly enough, I needed to have a knee surgery. I had to move back home during college, and I took a semester off of school, and it was right before I was going to start like moving into full-on student teaching. And I moved back to Atlanta, and I was like, I am done with middle of nowhere Georgia. I am back. I need to be back to the city. Like, this is where I need to be. So I looked to transfer. Well, I actually just decided I was transferring. I was like, I'm not going back. And I go to my advisor and I'm like, what's the quickest way I can graduate? And they're like, well, it's not education if you continue to do that, because that's going to be 2.5 to 3 more years. I go, oh, heck no, I ain't doing that. That's not even what I'm passionate about anymore. What is it? What can I do? And they were like, journalism. I'm like, cool, I can do that. I like to write. I like to do this. And so my like concentration was public relations, which I have done all the things that I've done. I learned how to do podcasts, which is ironically enough, I'm doing a podcast now. I'm leaning more into all the writing that I've developed over the last year. So again, like I stepped into a new belief system and stepped into an identity that I didn't know was going to serve me later in life. I didn't know I was going to start a podcast and get into an actual journalistic avenue, but my soul did. My soul knew. And so thankfully that all worked out the way that it was because I stopped believing I was stupid and stepped into believing that I was smart and capable. I can do anything that I want to. And then I just was further guided onto the path where I needed to be. And that's how God works, is that you continue to make that right step in the right direction that he's nudging you towards. Life will literally make so much sense. You'll be able to see why the puzzle pieces fell the way that they were and why that puzzle piece fit in first and not the other one. And it all makes sense. You see the weave work that God is doing in your life. You see the tapestry. When you're living in the moment, you're like, wait, why is the thread changing color? Why are we turning direction? I don't want to do this. But then when you sit back and you look and you're like, that's exactly why that had to happen that way. That's exactly why the color of my tapestry had to change and why I had to turn that direction and want to go a different path. But no, God is the perfect artist and he knows exactly what is supposed to happen in your life and which turn you're supposed to take and what new path you're supposed to take. Because when you're living in accordance to him and having that direct connection with him, he will make the path so clear to you that you'll begin to be able to be like, the color's changing. All right, God, what are you about to do? And you don't turn into the fight or flight and raising your cortisol and going into this constant worrying and anxiety because you believe that what's happening is going to best serve you. The doors that are closing, are going to open even better doors. I want to make a point, and I've been thinking about this a lot since April, our guest on episode 3, pointed this out to me. She was like, Carter, what if it wasn't God smacking you in the face that things are happening the way that they are, and that it's more of a remembering of what your soul remembers? And so I still have this deep religious programming within myself. I still use a lot of verbiage that that it's comforting to me, but I also do believe that I am in this co-creation with God. God and I are weaving this tapestry together because I have free will, but I also have a destiny and I have a purpose. And so that's why I don't want it to get it twisted, that I know that we speak a lot about that this is like a remembering within yourself, but I don't want to lose people and that there's a disconnection from me saying that, there's this God and he's moving these chess pieces and everything. And it's like that. No, that's just me and what I've lived the last 35 years and how it makes sense to me to be able to explain. If it is better for you to think about what I'm saying as, you are remembering and doing this, you are doing this, source is doing this, creator is doing this, universe. I want to be inclusive there because I don't want to lose people in this like, oh, well, I don't identify with that, so I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that is what I want people to realize is like, there's a lot of good nuggets everywhere. You can take
Can I stop you really quick, not to interrupt? I think the need to justify yourself in that way is literally based off of religious programming.
100%.
So I want you to even like take a step back and, here's the thing. I think we've got this all a little wrong. And I think we all have this a little right. I think there's nothing black and white, right? There's so much gray. And the problem is everything in our society, from religion to politics, is hierarchically driven. And it's societal conditioning and brainwashing passed down through generations. So, for me, that's why I don't just refer to one book. And I want to say this, and I know this is going to be a little unpopular, but I promise it'll be good because it all will tie itself in. I want to say that if I were to go to school to be a quantum physicist, I would not get away and be able to call myself a professional or an expert by reading one book. I'd want to study all the teachings surrounding it, from science to ancient history to ancient wisdom and knowledge and astrology and everything, because they all ultimately tie in to the same thing. And it's crazy because a lot of people, no matter where you stand literally, no matter your stance, we all are saying the same things. We're just using different words and saying we're right. That's literally what it boils down to. And here's the thing is, your right is your right, and that is okay. But that doesn't mean anybody else's right is wrong. It just might be wrong for you in your soul remembrance journey, and that's okay. But it also could deeply stem from societal conditioning, and that's also okay, because again, your path and your journey back to remembrance is yours and yours specific, because you could be on chapter 3 and somebody else on chapter 3000. And that's where it's really hard to make blanket statements, right? But I want to go and really tie this into original teachings. Let's tie this into Jesus. Let's tie this into Hermes and Buddha and Krishna and all of those people that have a very similar story. They taught inner divinity. The kingdom is within. But institutions have removed, rewritten, added in all kinds of things to enslave you into obedience and hierarchy.
The Bible even says this, that talks about the lying pin of the scribes, that there are literally the priests and the high up people in the temples, and they literally are creating their own rules. So yes, this has been going on forever.
It's been going on for a long time, for thousands of years. And it's crazy because when you really look at a system, that's teaching you God is outside of you, there's authority above you, and you can only gain redemption through suffering and sacrifice. That's not faith. That's control. That's cultural conditioning. That is colonial systems replaced by ancestral wisdoms with Western mental constructs. And like girls, we were taught to be small, to be wives and baby makers and homemakers and all these things that we couldn't be. Boys were taught to be soldiers and this, that, and the other. We were given titles and we were given expectations to remove us for our divinity. Women, we are portals between worlds. That is insane. And I'm not just speaking to women, it's putting any kind of being that has free will into a box and telling you what you should be. You have free will. You do not have to do that. That is control. And that control has been manipulated through the years. And, your emotions and your feelings and your trauma, they're pathologized. It's sensitivity being pushed on you, like, oh my God, if I just do this, all my sins are forgiven. And what? I don't understand that. And we're not even going to deep dive into that specific part. But what you need to understand is, and this really boils down to remembrance, right? Because capitalism thrives on insecurity, so it manufactures your identity and your identity crisis. The false self isn't your shadow, it's your cage. Saying that, every civilization knew this, that reality responds to identity. Why do you think the people in control are in control? They have a full understanding of the meaning of existence, and they've worked things out to play it in their favor, to use you as a cog in a machine. For example, Plato, he says, any chance in the habits of citizens will cause a change in the state. The Bhagavad Gita says the mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Buddha, what we think, we become. Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. I actually, Nietzsche, become who you are. James Allen, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. And then Upanishads is, you are what your deep driving desire is.
So it's funny you bring up the James Allen. My mom found this at an estate sale. So this was written in 1902. And she told me she bought it. She was like, this is everything that you've been talking about on your podcast. And I just have to read a couple paragraphs from the chapter 2, and it speaks so much to what we're talking about, and I love metaphors. So a man's mind may be likened to a garden, which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild, but whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. If no useful seeds are put into it, then an abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein and will continue to produce their kind. Just as a gardener cultivates his plot, keeping it far from weeds and growing the flowers and fruits which he requires, so may a man tend the garden of his mind, weeding out all the wrong, useless, and impure thoughts, and cultivating toward perfection the flowers and fruits of right, useful, and pure thoughts. By pursuing this process, a man sooner or later discovers that he is the master gardener of his soul, the director of his life. He also reveals within himself the laws of thought and understands with ever-increasing accuracy how the thought forces and mind elements operate in the shaping of his character, circumstances, and destiny. And it's not a big book. I highly recommend it.
I love that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
it literally
so
boils down to this one sentence. Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. You're
Exactly.
right. I feel like I could say it until I'm blue in the face and people don't believe me. If you believe that your bank account doesn't have the funds you need to do these things, it's funny. You know what? I actually have a perfect example for this because I have something I've financially been wanting to do. And I was seeing so many videos the last few days about tariffs and the fear mongering being put out. And did I check myself this morning and purchase what I wanted like that. I was like, wait, what? Because again, if I think I've got money issues and that I think all these things are going to happen, then they will. Because once you put that frequency out there, because everything is frequency, once you put it out there, that is what you will attract. And for me, I used to play into fear, and it started in 2020. And I know we're taking another ADHD left turn, but let me left turn and I'll loop it back, okay? I promise. But these are my favorite because they just are, my wheels are rolling right now.
Got a download.
The downloads. The fear that I had instilled in playing over and over and over in me. I was spending all of our money on bug out bags and needing to get out of where we were because we were close to a Mexico border. And if this were to happen and if that were to happen, and all I did, and then my friends that I had made, which weren't many too, that's all I did was talk about this to them and instill this fear I had in them. And no wonder they didn't want to be around me anymore. And they didn't. I stopped being invited. And I was creating this reality for myself. My anxiety was really bad. And, there were so many things that I was creating. And I realized the second that I stopped giving into fear and I started rebuking it and saying, you know what? I don't align with any of that. I mean, there was stuff for years. I was watching the planes in the sky and, it's going to be a blackout this year. The blackout will be next month and an invasion and a this and a that. And I gave it actually so much attention that it consumed me. It created anxiety. But one day I decided, I don't care. I don't care if I survive an apocalypse. I don't care if there's a grid blackout. I literally don't care. I don't care because guess what? I can't control it. I can't control. What can I control? And the moment I realized what can I control, and I realized it all stemmed from this place right here and this place right here, and I can control what's happening in my home, everything shifted. Anxiety disappeared. I thought it was because I started microdosing mushrooms. But what I realized, yes, I think that helped. But what I really realized is I stopped feeding the fear and I started focusing on what brought me joy and things I could control. And little by little, I brainwashed myself to realize that I can create my own reality. Somebody brings me fear, I literally laugh it off now. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. Because here's the thing, if there is something crazy like that, I signed up for this. So I don't care if that is the journey that I'm supposed to be on. I know that intuitively I'm going to be prepared for whatever because that's just the path that I'm supposed to take. And I also have that awareness from quantum physics and understanding that there are an infinite number of possibilities at all times. And I am always going to choose the possibility in my highest good. that brings me a life of joy and peace. And so I know that was really long-winded from that, but it stems from, we're all saying the same thing, right? Didn't Jesus say the same exact things?
Yeah, he was saying here's a few things that he said. According to your faith, let it be done to you. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer. The kingdom of God is within you, and it is done unto you as you have believed. So again, they all are saying the same thing.
Well, and here's the thing. The Bible and a lot of these books are amazing, right? They're full of metaphors and allegories and parables. They're not supposed to be taken all literally, not every single piece, right? They're not strict teachings. It's not a rule book. It is a path back to understanding. And, something that you and I have talked about this before. When you're looking at these translations, if they don't resonate with you, it's just because of how you've been conditioned to have, that has translated in a way, and you're conditioned in a way that it makes you feel some type of way with how you are translating them, right? But what I want us all to understand is a lot of these books, again, not only have they been edited and heavily altered and many books removed, but they're written in ancient languages that have multiple meanings for one word. So taking something like that, and that's where I really go back to only referring to one book to understand existence and God is doing both yourself and God a disservice. It's claiming you're an expert in something, but no one can ever be an expert when you've read or referenced one book. Something I really admire about my dad. He was like, I wanted to understand all the religious teachings before I dove into becoming a Christian or whatever. He was like, I was open to anything. I read the Torah. I went to his house and he has the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Torah, the Quran, and he has all these different biblical texts. And, I told him, and him and I get into it all the time about stuff, because he doesn't understand my way of thinking and I also don't understand his way, but yet we both study and read the same things and we ultimately come to the same conclusion. It's funny, we got in an argument once and I was like, Dad, we're saying the same exact things. I don't know how you don't see it. And I think for a moment he was just kind of like, well, you're right, but this is where I'm at. So this is where I'm staying. And that's okay, because I feel like when you've hit an age, that is a very normal place to be. But the admiration comes from, he was somebody willing to, if you're willing to stand so high on your pedestal, have other knowledge and understanding to not only back it up, but have genuine understanding. For me, if I knew I wanted that kind of close relationship, I would study any wisdom that I could. And that's what I've done, because that is how I feel. And not everybody feels like that. And that's okay, right? That's not everybody's journey.
If what you believe is truth, again, truth doesn't fear being questioned. So you should not fear questioning the truth you believe in. Mm-hmm. So I want to go into more about co-creating and reclaiming that. And where have you not trusted your own intuition? Where have you decided to trust your intuition after decades of outsourcing it? And I have a couple examples that really have stood out to me in my journey over the last 5 years. And, about 8 years ago is when I really started to heavily pray again and show that gratitude and just not be a selfish twat anymore, basically. And seriously, that's honestly what it was, prayer really does bring something, it removes your focus on yourself and you're thinking about so much more. And that's when you think about gratitude, you think about so much more than just yourself. And you think about, anyway, y'all get the purpose of gratitude. But for me, I used to have a huge problem with anxiety. I would focus on something and worry about it and, worrying it to think I can control it, which that does literally nothing. Worrying about something, you mentioned it, the things that truly should give us worry and anxiety, we don't have time to worry and be anxious about them because they are actually emergencies. But I remember when I got engaged and I started having this weird doubt that I was going to have fertility issues because both Tyler and I wanted to immediately have kids right after getting married. And I just was like, you know what? that's old me. Old me would spend time worrying about it. New me is going to talk about it and give it to God and ask for guidance and not try and focus on it and put me in a state of fight or flight and raise that cortisol. And so I started to pray about it. And then I would just be like driving down the road, and all of a sudden I'd hear this bloop, you'll be pregnant by December. And I'm like, well, that's weird. I'm not even thinking about being pregnant right now. I'm just thinking about making this red, going through this green light or whatever. And it just kept on happening. I would hear it all the time. It wouldn't even happen while I was in prayer. It would just be this random like, bloop, you're going to be pregnant by December. And we were getting married in October. And so it was so apparent. I was like, I need to tell people this because this is so crazy. Like, I need people to know that, like, I know when I'm going to get pregnant. So I told Tyler, I told my family, and sure enough, the cycle after our wedding, we got pregnant on that first try. And I was pregnant in November. So I got pregnant by December. And another time, God talked to me. So that was, again, a time where I outsourced, or I chose not to outsource that. And I leaned upon my own intuition and leaned upon God speaking to me, which, again, I bring back to the point April made. She's like, was it God or did just you remember? And I like to think it as both because, again, I still have, like you said, I still have a little bit of religious programming, and that verbiage and how I communicate that sits well with my soul. And so when we were thinking about having our second child, we just started immediately trying. We didn't pray about it. We just were like, yeah, we both feel good about this. Well, it didn't happen after a couple times. And we were like, that's weird. And we immediately realized, oh, we haven't been praying about this. We need to be praying about this baby. And the moment I started praying about this baby, all I heard was after Colorado, after Colorado, after Colorado. And this was in March when I started praying this. And we were going to Colorado in July. And I was like, okay, I can manage that. So we stopped trying. We weren't, trying to try. And just put that in the back of my mind. I was like, okay, it'll happen naturally. I'll be pregnant after Colorado. Well, the next month, long story short, I ended up having a miscarriage and I didn't know I was pregnant. And it was such a weird grief because I didn't know about the baby's life until it was already gone. And again, I think that was like some sort of like God's protection of me because like I don't know if I would have been able to like mentally handle that, And so again, like I was able to like just see the hand of God and all of that, like the purpose of all of that. And I just trusted, well, we'll have another baby and when we get back from Colorado. Sure enough, a week after Colorado, it was a positive test with Goldie. And like I'm just like, okay, wow, like this is crazy. Like God is talking directly to me. Like I am getting direct downloads of like truth. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to trust this more. Those random thoughts. Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it boils down to you're not just made in the image of God. You are an extension of divine intelligence, capable of memory, capable of creation, imagination. And that's not blasphemy, right? That's biology. It's quantum physics. It's entanglement in a fractal way. Like that is the core essence. That's why we have that connection. When you seek that connection, you have that connection. It's there. It's not lost. People just don't think to look for it. I was talking to somebody last night, and not to change the subject, but they're in such a state of suffering and they're like, oh, well, I prayed to God that I wanted patience. So he's giving me lessons to learn patience. And I'm like, but the lessons that you're being given are almost killing you. Do you really think that's, I said, but are you asking for guidance and relief and things like that? I said, because, a lot of people genuinely forget you ask and you will receive. Yes, you can ask and pray for patience. And guess what? You're going to be given the opportunity to be patient. However, as a child of God, having that divine connection, having these things with our Creator, I personally don't believe an all-knowing, all-loving God would want us to suffer to learn lessons. That just doesn't sit right with me.
Well, because when you get the 30,000 foot view, you see it not as suffering. Like there's purpose behind all of it. Like I could blame the world and hate the world, the fact that I've had 8 or 9 different surgeries. I was bedridden for almost a year. I had no friends. I had no job. I was 25 living in my parents' guest bedroom. But like, I could be upset for being sexually assaulted twice. But like, no, I see it all. I see it all, and I don't hold on to things like that to determine what my self-value is and what I have to offer the world.
So I think it's time, using all of that, to get into a deprogramming practice, like something tangible. You guys loved the tangible stuff we did in episode 5. I almost said season 5. We will get there too, but episode 5, we're going to start adding these tidbits into our episodes. You know, we've gotten some feedback. Would you please put these questions like somewhere? We will put them in the show notes. We know this time. Listen, this is the fact that we're on our 6th episode. I've already felt like we've been doing this forever. But I want to say that we're going to do this practice. It is, you know, an intellectual embodiment deprogramming practice. So we're going to do this in a couple parts, right? We're going to start with one, which is the awareness audit. So this question is, and I want you to answer this authentically. You might need to pause this, stop it, answer it as you go, write it down, mentally answer. It does not matter. Okay. What belief do you hold that limits you? What belief do you hold that limits you? Now let's dive a little bit deeper. Whose voice do you hear when you ask yourself that, right? Let's get into that like subconscious programming. We'll tap into that theta brain state that we were given, that we were in as a child. And here's the thing, you have the ability to tap into that. That's where a lot of people go back and do that inner child healing and a little, like all that inner child work. You're basically in a state of hypnosis your entire childhood, well, until 7, just being given information as to who you are and what you're going to be. All right, next question. If you had never been told who to be, what would you know to be true? Now that is a very loaded question, I know, because this is so layered. And here's the thing, start with your first memory. Start with like the main thing that's really molded your life, not transformed, molded your life.
Think about who you were before you were ever bullied for the first time or belittled or felt small. Like, who did you think you were before you experienced the quote unquote evil of the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe, eventually we'll have some kind of downloadable companion, if you will, for these kind of things. We'll see, just something to think about.
One thing I wanted to point out about the voice. So this is something that my parents would tell me growing up about how to distinguish, God or Satan in your mind, or if you want to think it as God and ego, your higher self and ego, whatever you want to think. God does not speak to you in an erratic voice. He speaks to you calmly, calls you by name, is sweet and calm, but your ego and Satan is going to talk to you erratically and angrily and have a tone behind it and make you feel small and bad about yourself. And that is not what you're supposed to listen to. And so that was a really helpful thing growing up, that I would be able to distinguish as like the angel and the devil on your shoulder. Is like the voice that you need to trust is that calm, guiding voice that calls you by your name.
And you should be able to intuitively feel the difference, right?
For sure.
Like it should be there. And if it's not there, find ways that you align with and resonate with to tap into that, right? But now we're going to get into 2, which this isn't even a journal prompt, but I would write this down. If you're journaling, if you're in your car, whatever, obviously circle back to this. We'll put this in the show notes. But, after doing all those, I want you to write down, I am not in whatever role that you've been put in. I am not, and your limitation. I am not, and your label. And you say, I am the image and embodiment of divine intelligence. And what I want you to do is start saying that every single day in the mirror.
Look yourself in the eyes.
Look yourself in the eye. If you hear my bird in the background, no, you don't. Thank you so much. Nothing I can do about it. All right. So part 3 is the act of becoming. I want you guys to pick one small act that contradicts the identity you're trying to shed. Example, speak when you'd normally shrink, rest when you'd normally hustle. Do you hear Kiwi in the background?
Boy.
Good boy. Say, I don't believe that anymore, even if your voice shakes. If going live or talking on your stories scares you, do it, right? Because the remembering comes through action, not affirmations. It comes through action. At the end of the day, this whole thing really boils down to you're not who they told you to be. You're not who they've conditioned you to be. You're not who you think you are. that, victim mentality that I am this or I'm not good at this. I don't have this to offer. I hear that a lot. I don't know what I have to offer people. I am not this. Listen, you are who you choose to remember. You are who you choose to align with and embody. That is where, you are who you surround yourself with. All these things start coming into play, and it all boils back to that simple but annoying and repetitive sentence I love so much. Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. Because ultimately it's all saying the same thing. But
well, most people just think like, oh, I'm just like this. I can't change. This is just who I am. Oh, no. Again, if I can go from not being a morning person to being a morning person, anybody can do anything. So,
well, and maybe for the first time, you get to be you without asking for permission.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're going to end it today. Stay tuned for episode 7 because we're just going to be getting deeper and deeper and deeper. See you next time.
Bye, y'all.